How do businesses actually survive sudden trade wars? I mean, it's a pretty existential question, isn't it? If you're running a retail or manufacturing business, especially one with razor-thin margins, a sudden shift in global trade policy doesn't just mean a bad quarter. We're talking about the complete erosion of your business model, literally overnight.
So, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to dive deep into exactly how firms adapt their supply chains to manage these new tariff regulations. We're taking this massive, super complex world of international trade policy and bringing it right down to the ground level. Straight to the boardroom decisions and warehouse floors where the real survival strategies are being forged.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover Section 1, the global tariff shock, Section 2, supply chain vulnerabilities, Section 3, map your supply chain, Section 4, classify products correctly, and finally, Section 5, advanced mitigation strategies. Let's get right to work.
All right, Section 1, the global tariff shock. Let's look at this macro disruption. Okay, let's dive into this. To really understand the scale of the challenge here, we need to look at a prime example of a sudden macroeconomic shock. Take the political agreement signed between the US and the EU in August of 2025. This deal set a new reciprocal baseline tariff of 15% for goods originating in the EU and vice versa. Now, when policies shift this rapidly, it creates a massive exogenous shock. Suddenly, the basic math that made a product profitable yesterday, it just doesn't work today. And this brilliantly illustrates the dynamic at play here. On one side, you've got the geopolitical chessboard, right? Nations imposing tariffs, retaliating, negotiating, it's all high-stakes diplomacy. But on the exact opposite side, you see the immediate corporate reaction. Look at the adoption levels for resilience strategies. It's an absolute scramble. To survive these moves on the chessboard, businesses across the globe are being forced to rapidly adopt digitalization, flexible logistics, and intense risk monitoring. They simply don't have the luxury of waiting around for the politicians to finish their game. Moving on to Section 2, supply chain vulnerabilities. How exactly do these geopolitical shocks hurt individual firms?
Well, it all comes down to global value chains, or GVCs for short. You see, modern manufacturing isn't just done in one place anymore. It's a highly fragmented worldwide production network. Think of it like a giant domino effect. Even a minor tariff adjustment at the very top of a value chain cascades down, layer by layer. So, an extra cost on, say, raw aluminum, well, that affects the car part manufacturer, which affects the assembly plant, which ultimately erodes the final retail margin for the consumer. Because supply chains are just so interconnected, a targeted tariff doesn't just hit its target, it sends severe ripple effects throughout the entire global economy.
But here's where we have to get really specific, because tariffs actually don't hurt everyone equally. It totally depends on whether your imports are complements or substitutes. Let me explain. If a sector relies on imports as critical complements, meaning they are essential intermediate inputs that they can't easily replace, they face massive disruption and irreversible adjustment costs. They have to absolutely scramble to find new suppliers. However, if a sector treats imports just as competing substitutes, a tariff on those foreign goods might actually provide a short-term cash flow boost by reducing foreign competition. So at the end of the day, your vulnerability is entirely dictated by exactly where you sit in the supply chain.
All right, Section 3, map your supply chain. This is zooming in on your frontline defensive action.
So if I asked you right now, where do your products actually come from? Could you give me a granular, legally defensible answer? Because if you really want to manage new tariff regulations, general knowledge just isn't going to cut it. You need an energetic, action-oriented playbook, and that starts with a rigorous mapping of your entire operation. So the crucial point here is executing these 4 foundational steps. Number 1, identify your suppliers, and I mean not just the primary ones, but the secondary tier as well. Number 2, review the actual origin of the materials. Number 3, analyze exactly where the assembly locations are. And number 4, evaluate your final sales destinations. You have to lay all of this out because tariffs are highly specific to trade corridors. You might find that simply changing one single supplier in your Tier 2 network entirely alters your overall tariff exposure.
But a massive warning here. You cannot just arbitrarily move things around on paper to dodge taxes. No way. We have to look at strict European customs case law. The famous Harley-Davidson precedent established that if you relocate production primarily just to avoid tariff measures, it does not qualify as economically justified. It will fail the strict rules of origins test. Under rules like the major portion rule, the origin of the product might just revert right back to the country where the highest value materials were sourced. So any mapping and relocation strategy absolutely must add genuine economic value.
Let's move to Section 4, classify products correctly. It's time to talk about commodity code audits.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how tariff measures are applied using very specific commodity codes. And honestly, this process can be surprisingly subjective. Let's look at an actual ruling from the EU Court of Justice regarding nets used for making pockets mounted behind car seats. The customs authorities tried to classify them as essential seat parts for motor vehicles, which, you guessed it, carried heavy tariffs. But the court ruled they are correctly classified as non-essential accessories, exempting them entirely. That single microscopic classification difference saved entire profit margins. It just proves that aggressively auditing your commodity codes is a mandatory survival tactic.
Finally, Section 5, Advanced Mitigation Strategies. Let's see how this builds into an advanced corporate shield for companies looking to go beyond the basics.
Let's rapid fire through these. Sophisticated firms are pulling some really advanced organizational and legal levers to build this comprehensive shield. First, they're looking closely at transfer pricing, essentially adjusting intercompany pricing models to manage their customs value while making sure they avoid double taxation. Then, they're leveraging EU special procedures, using things like bonded warehouses and inward processing relief to physically store and manufacture goods while suspending customs duties entirely. They're also engaging in strategic stockpiling right ahead of known policy implementation dates. And of course, they are aggressively pursuing supplier diversification, shifting contracts to alternative regions like India or Africa to just bypass volatile trade corridors altogether.
And for the absolute biggest players, we're seeing the ultimate strategy, the local for local shift. Look at pharmaceutical giant Novartis. In anticipation of tariff impacts, they are rolling out a staggering $23 billion investment over 5 years to expand 10 US-based manufacturing facilities. Their goal? To completely localize production for the American market. They have even created dedicated internal tariff task forces. This is a massive, real-world case study of reshoring to avoid geopolitical risks entirely. It proves that tariffs aren't just taxes anymore. They are fundamentally restructuring global trade, shifting us away from pure globalization and toward localized resilience.
We've seen today that trade policy uncertainty is no longer just a temporary bug in the system. It is for sure the new normal. From the macro-level political chess match down to the micro-level adjustments of commodity codes and supplier mapping, the rules of the game have permanently changed. So I'm going to leave you with this provocation. Look really closely at your own operations. Is your company's supply chain truly resilient enough for the next geopolitical shift? Thank you for joining this explainer. Start mapping, start auditing, and stay resilient.